Right, a few things to get across there, isn't there? Canberra, of course, sat today, Parliament sat today, so there on the spot, Sky News political editor Andrew Clennell joins me now. Hey, let's go through the entrails of this Donald Trump, Anthony Albanese call and then the later announcement. It looked like, Andrew, when we saw the Prime Minister give us the readout of his conversation with the President, there was a positive. They'd agreed on language. They were both going to use the same language, that we were seeking an exemption. But then about an hour or so later, it was like a soap opera. You had this Oval Office press call. You had the US President signing away the executive order, and in it had no exemptions. So are we in or are we out?
Difficult to say, but Donald Trump also said there'd be great consideration to Anthony Albanese's request. I guess we'll find out over the next month, because that's when the order comes into force. But yeah, you wouldn't put your house on it at the moment, but you'd have to say there's a chance. I mean, he said the UK had no chance, for example, in that press briefing in the Oval Office. For him to say great consideration, maybe he's after some sort of deal, something else out of Australia, but I think it could have gone far worse. Let's face it, he could have just given Anthony Albanese a blanket no. Sorry, I can't spare Australia when I'm punishing all these other countries with these tariffs. And just tonight, government sources appear to be briefing out that in the previous agreement with Trump and Scott Morrison, there were a couple, one with Turnbull, one with Scott Morrison, not to impose these tariffs in Australia. Scott Morrison had given a guarantee that the amount of steel exported to the US would have a lid on it, would be restricted. And what's in the fine detail of the order apparently is that that's not the case. Australia and other countries exceeded caps that they promised to put on this. So that's another interesting, complicating factor in the whole thing. But there's no doubt the coalition, if this doesn't come to fruition, can use this to their advantage by saying, well, we were able to reach agreement with Trump, Anthony Albanese, and you're not. If a coalition government's in power, we're more of the politics of Donald Trump, and we might be able to get an outcome where you can't. Peter Dutton's not playing that card today. He's saying he's got a bipartisan position on it. He's rather wisely seeing how it all plays out.
He's sort of a different president this time round. You know, I mean, I think we'd all be wiser coming back to the job. But I mean, he is running harder at it. He talked in that press conference from the Oval Office about his high approval ratings. We'll go through those a bit later on. But, you know, there's a determination, there's an energy to him. He's not sort of spraying out a bit like he was in the first few months last time. I mean, I made the point, you know, in 3 weeks he seems to have done more than the Prime Minister's done in 3 years. He's not mucking around.
Well, there's 3 stories a day, isn't there, which is quite extraordinary. But he's also saying some pretty extraordinary things, such as Canada should be a 51st state of America. And I don't think this is the last of it on the trade war front, because he's also flagging cars and pharmaceuticals are next. So, you know, I don't think he's ever going to wage any sort of military war. Donald Trump, he makes threats and people jump, has always been kind of the way, whether it be North Korea or now he's trying it on Hamas. But he's very much into this trade war side of things, and it's something we've never seen before. Donald Trump likes to say this is the biggest thing, you know, that anyone's ever seen. Well, this is the most frenetic start to a presidency that anyone can remember in modern memory. So, gosh, I wouldn't like to predict what happens next, Peter.
All right, let's go to the Australian Parliament. Pretty scrappy question time today. This could be the last sitting week we have before an election's called. I know we sort of are in that professional game of election watch at the moment. But what do you make of things?
I thought it was a dull day in the question time, frankly. I think everyone wants to be out of here. And this is the problem, the longer it drags on before an election, every single thing in this place is about an election, so may as well have one. But WA, of course, got in the way. There's no way the Prime Minister wants to get too much in the way of that. The big things next week, of course, when everyone here expects a rate cut. But, you know, it's a crazy game for Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher when we're this late into a preparation of a budget. I'm pretty sure that Jim Chalmers would be of the view, I just want to do the budget now because I've done all the work on it, and so have my officials. So if he junks that and goes in April, as a lot of us suspect, because there's a rate cut in February 18, he'd only go in April, Peter, if there was a rate cut in February 18, is my understanding, then Jim Chalmers and his officials probably have reason to be a bit ticked off, frankly.
Yeah, but everything he's costed for the budget to announce on budget night, he announces during the campaign. His costings are a bit more bulletproof because they're Treasury costings as opposed to the opposition. And as you know, with PFO, you're 10 days in from the writs, and that's the first time the opposition gets a good look at the numbers. So, you know, it's a beautiful pincer movement for the opposition because they're stuck. You know, they're operating on a campaign footing with no real set of numbers beyond MyEFO in last December. So, you know, there's an argument to really screw around with their costings if you don't have a federal budget.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I've said before, the question will be, and I put it to him, what aren't you squibbing it if you don't have a budget? Which he said, no, we're not.
Are we going to get electoral reforms through before the end of this week, do you think?
Yeah, Thursday, I reckon. I reckon the deal's been done, Peter, and it's one of the things that goes through in the Senate on a Thursday night because both sides of major politics get an advantage out of it. It kind of has an effect on Clive Palmer, the caps, but it also has an effect from the Liberal point of view on the Teals and the Climate 200 and Simon Holmes Accord. So there's kind of a bargaining chip for each side, a win for each side, and that's, of course, the only reason the coalition would support it, particularly at this late stage. But it has that classic smell of something they're going to pass at, 10 minutes to midnight. They could probably pass it now.
Yeah, I just made that point that you made there about a Clive Palmer or a Simon Holmes Accord. It doesn't come into effect until January 2027, but it will cap individual donors at $600,000 a year, lower the public disclosure threshold to $1,000, and limit spending per candidate to $800,000. Now, in some of those Teal seats, I know the seat of Curtin, for example, they spent over $1 million on that campaign. So that would bring Curtin back by at least $200K.
Yeah, and I think Josh Frydenberg and Monique Ryan both spent $2 million, right? So it would have that effect, no doubt, if there's more money for the Teal in a particular seat, like Curtin, I think you mentioned. But I guess it's an even playing field at least. Like the Liberal Party couldn't spend more than that themselves in that sort of contest.
No, not at all. Not at all. Labor could because they've got donations coming in from the unions, but the Libs will never get that sort of money. Andrew, thank you.